pequeno problema aqui. Eu queria então só para apresentar a professora Irene, eu queria só dizer rapidamente o porquê, né, da presença dela e qual é a expectativa nossa da UFMG. A professora Irene Klaver, ela trabalha na Universidade do Norte do Texas e ela trabalha com uma área que para nós ainda é razoavelmente nova, que é a diversidade cultural e como isso se relaciona com água, com recursos hídricos. Então a ideia de convidá-la foi porque a gente vem trabalhando com água, com recursos hídricos há muitos anos. A gente já incorporou a dimensão econômica, por exemplo, parcialmente algumas coisas da dimensão social, mas a gente não tinha até então atentado para a extrema necessidade de incorporar os aspectos da diversidade cultural e como isso se relaciona com a água e com recursos hídricos. Então, graças a um contato do Cláudio Guerra, que eu quero aproveitar para apresentar, que é um parceiro nosso já de longa data, desde a época do PADCT, na década de 90, né, o Cláudio então nos apresentou a Irene, que veio para um evento na Univale, a Universidade do Vale do Rio em Governador Valadares. E lá naquele evento, a ideia foi exatamente falar sobre esta possibilidade de construir uma parceria, não só com a Univale, mas com outras instituições, onde a gente espera poder incluir nas nossas práticas, né, nas nossas atividades, um olhar específico para a diversidade cultural. Então nós fizemos um contato com o IEAT e graças à gentileza deles, nós pudemos então trazer a doutora Irene Klaver, que vai ficar uma noite aqui, ela vai embora amanhã, e a ideia era poder apresentar isso para uma apreciação, enfim. O que a gente espera com isso é desenhar uma parceria, porque, entre outras coisas, eu aproveito também para anunciar para alguns, a maioria provavelmente não sabe, a UFMG, a reitoria já designou uma comissão que está estudando, está montando uma proposta de um Instituto da Água da UFMG. Esse Instituto da Água, que será provavelmente durante muito tempo um instituto virtual, pelo menos durante algum tempo, com certeza, a ideia é que esse instituto venha reunir, né, com todas as iniciativas relacionadas à água na universidade. E ele é um instituto que vai estar ligado à reitoria, como está o IEAT. O IEAT também é um parceiro. Então essa é a construção que está sendo feita, que eu aproveito então para agradecer o apoio do IEAT, para agradecer também ao ICB, que é de onde nós somos, para agradecer ao Cláudio e certamente para agradecer à doutora Irene Klaver. Então, sem mais delongas, eu vou pedir a ela que faça a sua palestra e eu espero que a gente possa discutir um pouco a respeito. Well, on behalf of the IEAT Institute and the ICB, we have a pleasure to have you here, and what I did, I just explained some part of our connections that we hope that we can progress with this initiative, and then we will have the considerations on the water and cultural diversity. So please tell us about what you came for.
Thank you so much. Obrigado. Do you speak English? All of you? I'll speak very slow. Most of who does not speak English can understand English? Oh, all of you. Wow. Okay, I will have a quiz afterwards to see if you really understood what I was saying. Well, I don't understand Portuguese, so I have no idea what Professor Francisco told about me, but I hope it was good. I have no idea what kind of projects he said that we are going to plan, but I trust it will be okay. Well, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm very glad to be here at the university here. Yesterday and the day before we had a workshop in Gobernador Valadares. I don't remember the names. Which was very, very interesting. It was a workshop about agua, diversidad cultural y territorio. So at least you understand one sentence. And today I will give a presentation that's similar, almost the same as the one I gave as an openings presentation at the workshop. Basically, to do two things: to introduce the importance of this particular topic, and secondly, to show what various organizations, specifically UNESCO, is trying to do. UNESCO is the United Nations Education, Science and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and the headquarters are in Paris. United Nations headquarters are in New York, but UNESCO is in Paris. So that are the two things that I will try to do here. Again, I'm really pleased that you all showed up. I know you are vacation, holidays, so I'm amazed. What are you doing here? You must get some extra credits or whatever, I don't know. That's what I do when I want my students to go. Good. So water and culture. The picture you see here is the Los Angeles River, LA Los Angeles River. Next to this, the banks, you see a little bit of wall there. Behind that wall is a high school, and I went with a friend, a filmer friend, to look for the springs of the LA River. We couldn't find them. We asked the high school kids, we asked, do you know where the LA River is? LA River? They never heard of the LA River, did you? No idea. It's right there, behind the wall, behind the school. But it doesn't look much like a river, right? I hope that you know where the Dassie River is. Have you heard of the Dassie River? Maybe not the way that I pronounce it. How would you say? Dassie. Maybe I pronounced LA River wrong when I asked the kids. Dassie River. You know where the Dassie River is. Because it's a river. It's a big river. Well, this is what happens when rivers are being overused for irrigation and mainly for, actually in this case, for the urban drinking water, and actually it's basically turned into a ditch that takes water out when it rains. And, so the point is, people have no idea where their water comes from, and they have no idea where their rivers are sometimes. I mean, you know, not always. But, so the point is, how can we reconnect people to their basic waterways? And that's the subject of this presentation. Next slide, Claudia. So, water connects. Water reconciles the conservation of biodiversity with cultural diversity, with social and economic development. And in your language, to develop is envolver? Desenvolver. And what I try to do in this presentation is very close to what yesterday in the Agua, Diversidade, Territory workshop, Professor Roberto, you know Professor Roberto? Yeah, I cannot remember his name. Professor Roberto Monchimoro. He was speaking about the desenvolver, the relationship with envolver in the word, in order to create a connection There should be involvement, engagement. People should be connected to their waters, their land, in order to care. When you are involved, you care. When you are engaged, you care. So any development, any economic development, any social development should be a development that is connected to envolver. Same word in English, same root, involve. So that's water. Water does that by its very nature. It flows. In its flow, it connects. It connects, and it connects the urban world with the rural world. It connects the various problems with climate change, and in ecological terms, they talk more and more about the notion of ecosystem services. Have you heard of that, ecosystem services? That are the... Okay, you have heard of it. Besides the very physical connection of water, it also connects ideologically in what I call the cultural imagination, the way that people think of themselves in their culture, their identity. So water as an image and frame, it connects real places with ideas and importantly also with ideals. Like, what do you want to make of yourself? What do you want to make of your society, of your own future, of the future of your community? Ideals, especially in terms of a sustainable future. So culture, when we talk about culture, water and cultural diversity, there are thousands of definitions of culture, and usually they are related to cultural history. I want to focus on culture as what I call here a capacity to aspire. In economic theory, you have an economist called Amartya Sen who works a lot with capacity building, the building of capacity for communities to be able to be economically capable to actually be a real agent in this world, to be a participant. Well, this is a capacity building in terms of aspiration. So it's related to that notion of ideal that I just spoke about, connecting to a future, the capacity to aspire. This is a term of an anthropologist called Appadura, and I really like that definition of culture because it's forward-looking. It's not only about preservation of our past, but it's about our relationship to the future. And again, water is such an important vehicle, such an important medium to symbolize this kind of connection to the future. As I just said, culture is always in development. Desenvolver. Never get it right. The desenvolver, and that kind of development is symbolized almost by the rivers, by the notion of water, insofar as it is always in flux, always changing. The most characteristic of water is its change, its flux, its transformational capacity. And that is at the same time very much at the root of any kind of culture. No culture stays the same. If you have a dictionary is almost a week later already old-fashioned. Like what the kids on the street will say is not in there yet. Might be in there like 10 years later, but it's always in flux, always changing. It's hard to grasp a culture. It's always in movement. So I always like to focus on the notion of the transformation, the translation. When things are changing, you need always to translate things. I've had a couple of talks with some of you about the subtleties in culture. Like even if you understand English or Portuguese, which I don't understand, but you still need to translate, because I'm not Brazilian. I don't know what. Actually, in my country, or actually in the United States, for example, the private and public universities have an opposite meaning than they have here. So that you need translation in order to understand another culture, by definition, even if you speak the language. Specifically in interdisciplinary projects, and any water project is by definition interdisciplinary because you're dealing with so many different fields of expertise. So translation is always an issue, is always a requirement. And it's actually exciting, because it's exciting to translate your concepts in the language of a biologist or a sociologist or the common people. That's the hardest thing, to actually translate our goals, our initiatives to the general community, especially around water issues. And that bridge is the hardest bridge to get, and it's the most important bridge, because that way you get that involvement that I started off talking with. In order to get the involvement of the people, you need to be able to translate the concerns, the worries about water to a larger audience. And that's the hardest part. And that's actually what this program is about, what the UNESCO program is about, to translate water issues to a larger audience. And in that sense, to get a participation from the people, so they can be, the message can be transformative, needs to be translated in order to get the engagement, the involvement. That means that you work with the cultural imagination of the people, with the way that they perceive their landscape, themselves in their landscape, their relationship to the water bodies that are in their landscape. That means cultural imagination. So it's not imagination in the sense of fantasy, but it's like, what kind of image do you have of your world? And that's only when you understand that you can actually start to work with innovations in social movements and so forth. Next one. So water in culture has a lot of different meanings, and I just put in those slides to show how in the first world water is sometimes perceived like very high-end stores in only in Los Angeles and Dallas and Amsterdam, Tokyo, and so forth. Only in those places where people have a lot of money, they go to these kind of stores. It's called the H2O store. So that's their sense of water. I always tell my students, if you want to understand the cultural imagination of water, the way that people think about water, look at advertisement. How does water surface in advertisement? Because that gives you, those guys have done a lot of research. I mean, any advertisement you see is not just like, oh, let's put it in newspaper. They have done a lot of research to see what is in the cultural imagination, what moves people, what attracts people. Well, apparently water as a symbol is very attractive. I mean, these kind of stores, they're just 10 years old. Well, they look expensive. They are expensive, I can tell you. I've been in them just for my research, taking pictures of it. I was just like a kid in a candy store just to look at all these. It's a high-end cosmetic store with body stuff and shampoo, all H2O. I didn't buy anything. It was way too expensive, but I took pictures of everything, and they gave me a little package because they thought that I was going to do some good outreach. I guess I'm doing right now, but maybe it's a stores in Sao Paulo or something like that. But that's how water apparently functions in the cultural imagination of a kind of high-end urban community. Yeah. What do they sell? They sell like shampoo and no water at all. No, they sell shampoo and lotion and cosmetics. It's great. It's a great store to kind of walk. And it's like French cuisine, It's like in French cuisine you have a big plate with a little bit of nothing on there. And this is a huge store. There's a couple of items there. Next one. So this is actually how water usually functions in the real world. The other one is also the real world, but kind of high-end real. This is the other end of the real world, and how a lot of people actually know water, namely locked up for irrigation and transportation to cities. The main use of water 70% worldwide of water is being used for irrigation, for agriculture, for food production. So these are just a couple of examples of how people experience water in contemporary society. You have to know that like more than half of the world population nowadays lives in cities. So they have very little contact with real water bodies. As I showed in my opening slide of the San Francisco River, the LA River, that's the way that most rivers actually appear in cities, in the kind of at the backside of cities, and all channelized to control the floods and so forth. Next one. So, in order to create a renewed connection, to create that engagement, that involvement with water, with rivers, there are two UNESCO projects, and this one, the first one, is a very tiny one, but it's in a division of the man and biosphere, and I come back to that later because that's important for you guys to know. It's a collaborative initiative of UNESCO's Division of Ecological and Earth Sciences and the Man and Biosphere Program with my university. And in that initiative we try to connect river basins with interdisciplinary research and policy in order to make that connection to the local people. The goal is to develop a cultural component in ecosystem-based river management. You need to know that in water management world, there is a new concept. It's called Integrated Water Resource Management, IWRM, which is a very important new development in water management. It's not that it's like 10, 15 years old, but relatively new. It meant that the integration meant that they integrated ecology in hydrology. Traditionally, water management was mainly hydrology, engineers that were going to construct the world so that cities got good water, got good wastewater treatment plants, that irrigation structures could function very well. It's very, very, very important, but they didn't actually think that much about the larger environment, and definitely not about the effects of their infrastructure on the rivers. Actually, in the 20th century is characterized by the century of modernity, with the slogan progress, and progress meant, as President Roosevelt literally said, any drop of water that reached the ocean or the sea is waste. It's a waste that a drop of water reached the ocean because we didn't use it. No progress. You wasted the water. Well, that paradigm, that's profoundly modernist paradigm of progress in terms of human development, has completely changed. And that means the integration of ecology in the hydrology. The relevance of actually that some water should reach the ocean, should reach the sea. And a lot of rivers don't reach the ocean anymore, and that's a worldwide problem. The Yellow River, huge river in China, half of the year doesn't reach the ocean. The Colorado River in America doesn't reach the ocean. The Indus, big river in India, doesn't reach the ocean. Sometimes, but big parts of the year it doesn't. Similarly, the Nile of Egypt doesn't reach the Mediterranean Sea. It's amazing. The effect of it is disastrous for the deltas. The delta of the Colorado River, which was once one of the most beautiful ecosystems in the world, a famous American conservationist called Aldo Leopold. Have you heard of Aldo Leopold? Yeah? He wrote a beautiful piece about the delta of the Colorado River. Well, it's history. If you read his piece, it's like, wow, this was the way it looked like. And the consequences are disastrous, not not only for the ecosystem, for all the plants and animals that live there, but there was also a Native American tribe, the Kokobas that lived there, that were fishermen. Well, they live now in a desert. They still have their identity as fishermen. I think their soccer team is called like Fishers or something like that. And they still drive out their boat to the ocean, but they have to drive 40 kilometers to get to the water. So that's a lot of gas to pull your trailer all the way there. Then they go in the bay and they barely catch any fish anymore. So they don't make any money. It's the death of their culture. Well, that's what this program is about water and cultural diversity. We killed not only the delta, we also killed the whole culture that had a very hundreds of year-long relationship with the Colorado River, with the bay over there. Very tragic. But that's just one example. The same for all the other deltas. Profound change because not a drop of the water reached the ocean anymore. Okay. Next one, Claudio. As I said, this is the first one of the two UNESCO projects that I want to talk about. And so this one is located in the Men and Biosphere program, which is in the Earth Sciences program of UNESCO. The other main program I will talk about later. This is very important for you guys because the Dust Sea River is related actually to a Men and Biosphere site. So for an interesting research project, you might want to revive this Men and Biosphere site here and make it an active engagement. I put a name on there, which Serra de Espinazo. Espinazo. I just learned this morning in the plane that it means spine. Serra de Spine. Let me first start on the top. So the biosphere reserves are put into place in the 1970s by UNESCO as an alternative for the conservation or preservation areas that were traditionally the parks, the American model, Yellowstone Park, Yosemite Park, and so forth. Well, that model didn't work so well in, like, say, Africa, because the parks or the wilderness areas in the United States, they all have one thing in common, namely, no humans are allowed to live there. Well, if you want to have that model in, say, Africa or some places in Asia, where people have lived for 5,000 years, and suddenly you say, like, hey guys, this is actually a really good area for elephants and so forth, move. It doesn't work so well. People come back anyways, and it's not fair. It's not fair. When we talk about development, we have to talk also about the possibilities of people to live sustainably in an area. And usually those people have lived sustainably for those 5,000 years in that area, because otherwise they would not live there anymore, right? It's kind of logic. So they tried to have an alternative model, and they decided for this Men and Biosphere site. It's of course a very ancient name, because nowadays if they would create it, they would not call it this way. Why not? Testing your English.
Slow, a little slow. Speak a little slower.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, nowadays, this is a model of the 70s. They would not call it Men and Biosphere because it's no woman involved. But then they didn't care so much. Anyway, it's actually, they do have permanent discussions about that at UNESCO. I just was there for half a year, and but it's hard to change a name when it is branded like this. Anyways, so they try to connect economic development with eco-conservation. So all the projects that are allowed in those areas should be say ecotourism, or should be sustainable. The idea is that you have a core site that's like the American wilderness areas, like it's preserved, and around it is a so-called buffer zone where you have economic activities where people live and are allowed to live, as long as they are not put a huge hotel there or a huge mining operation and so forth. And then around that you have a transition zone, so it's a kind of scaled allowing of economic development, but all within the parameters of sustainability. A very good model. Countries have to apply for it. A lot of countries did. And so there are a couple of pretty old sites all over the world, in Thailand and so forth. And I think this is a relatively new one. The problem is that people start to use it as a way to attract tourism, or there's no police force that comes along and says like, well, what are you doing here? And it's not sustainable. And so the enforcement is a little bit is a problem. But it's a good model. It's a good model, and it's meant to be what I sometimes call kind of living laboratories, a place where people can experiment with these new relationships and are helped out with their experimentation. So you have one right here, and it might be really nice to explore what the relation is of the biosphere with the Rio Doce and so forth. My university has a field station in a biosphere reserve called Cape Horn, right at the bottom of the earth. And in this biosphere reserve, one of my colleagues started this biosphere reserve, very, very beautiful area. So that might be one of the collaborations. I don't know if Professor Francisco talked about that when he introduced me, probably not. But it might be one of the collaborations we can think of. Okay, next one. Another project related to changing the imagination around rivers is the Global Rivers Film Project. We just finished this first film, and I would love to work together with your film department or put them in touch with the filmers that we worked with in this project to make a film about the Rio Doce. So if some of you are interested in film projects, go ahead. I think there's a nice framework for it. Okay, next one. Another way to relate people to the river, to create this engagement, this envolver, as Professor Roberto, the one that just entered, they didn't all know you, but now they know. I was quoting you from yesterday, the relationship between desenvolver and envolver. So this is another relationship, another project that actually actively tried to create that connection of people to the river through, and this is on a major river in the United States, the Mississippi River. You all have heard of the Mississippi River. It's in New Orleans, which has, of course, a very complex relationship with the river. It's meant for people to have a real building at the river where they can have research, biological research, research about the river in any kind of way, but also art events around the river. People can visit it, there will be a museum, there will be all kinds of activities, so the local population can come in, the elderly can drink a cup of coffee or have meetings there, all kinds of activities are planned in this particular space. And yesterday we were in Valadares, and the university there has a magnificent, beautiful space right on the Rio Doce. I can imagine them doing something like this to promote a relationship to the river. So as it says here, you will find scientists working side by side with artists, all kinds of visitors interacting with researchers, school children learning about the river, musicians, dancers. So you get a very natural connection. You remember one of my first slides, how water connects? Well, you have sometimes in our society, things are so compartmentalized, so isolated, like even in academia. So you have to help to make that connection visible again. Well, this is one of the vehicles through which you can make those connections visible again, or a possibility for people to experience those connections, and they actually meet each other in a real place. They learn to work together. So if you have a situation like this, you are forced, it sounds too negative, you are invited to translate, to transform the imagination about water, because you're working there together. Next one. It's another slide about a river sphere. So its unifying theme is the river, and I can imagine a river sphere around the Rio Doce, where the unifying theme is the Rio Doce. And other great rivers, and you analyze it from all these different angles. And it's not only different disciplines, it's not only from academia, it's also from the experience of local people, or fishermen, or clam, whatever. All kinds of different activities around the river, or maybe just swimming in the river, which of course requires that the water is in good condition. In essence, a building or event or a project like that is like a river, because it is connecting people. It is like the water. It connects, and it connects it in engagement, in involving people, make them excited about it instead of afraid for the flood, because that's the way people experience the Mississippi right now. They are afraid of a flood. Oh, there's a little bit more going on with the river. It's also exciting. Next one. So river spheres facilitate involvement, engagement, and motivate people. You remember one of my first slides, like how culture is the capacity to aspire? Well, in order to work on capacity building, you have to provide means for people to actually get engaged, to get involved, to become motivated. You can say all these things like, oh, people should be motivated. Well, what are you going to do about that to get them motivated? You have to entice them, you have to draw them in. So you have to create a space or a program or a project so that they get excited about the river and motivated, and you create a culture of aspiration. And in that sense, a culture of belonging, a culture of longing to belong. So it integrates environmental flows and cultural flows. And in that sense, again, a river is so beautiful because it has such a beautiful symbolic value with its focus on flows. They influence lifestyles, and lifestyles influence the river. And I got a question yesterday about this, like, what is that lifestyle? Well, lifestyle is nothing much different from culture. And as we saw in the first slides, if you have your river just for agriculture or for providing water for the city, that's a particular lifestyle. If you just use all the water to watering your lawn or clean your car, that's a particular lifestyle that influences the river, influences your water body. Well, similarly, the water body, your river, influences your lifestyle, because think about it, almost all major cities in the world are at a river. Why? Because of trade, you got transportation, all those words that start with trans that I showed on one of my first slides. You get transportation, you get a lot of transformation, a lot of movement and economic possibility. But also, they needed the water for bathing, for drinking, for cleaning, and so forth. Makes sense, right? So the rivers influence the lifestyle. You will have a different lifestyle if you live not along a river, if you live inland in the mountains, than when you live in the river, right? Nowadays it has changed, maybe because we got water anyways, or we got electricity anyways, but you see the point. So rivers influence lifestyle, lifestyle influence river. So Riversphere wants to make that explicit, wants to show that to people, wants them to experience that, to see their effect upon the river and the effect of the river upon them. So it's also meant to be a vision, to be an inspiring image of the future, and it's meant to reimagine the river. So all the time this focus on the cultural imagination. How do you see your water body? How do you imagine it? How do you experience it? Excellent. So that was the first UNESCO project, the River Cultures Ecological Futures project, which is specifically focused on rivers. The second one is a much larger project within another division of UNESCO. Actually, the major division in UNESCO is the water division. It's called IHP, that is the International Hydrological Program. I'll show a slide in a minute about the structure of UNESCO. But so this is a major new project in UNESCO, explicitly to facilitate what I said earlier, to integrate a cultural component in that integrated water resource management. So we had the integration of ecology and hydrology. This program is specifically organized to implement a cultural component in the integration of integrated water resource management. Next one. So the project wants to focus on the cultural significance of water, as I just explained earlier, the relationship between lifestyle and focus on the social and political institutions that govern water use. So that's the bridge that I talked about earlier. How do we connect our messages to actually the communities, to the water policy, the water decision-making bodies, the managers, and so forth. Another focus is a focus on the cultural practices that actually contribute to water use or water conservation. Very important, because a lot of cultures have actually very good traditional practices of, say, irrigation or rainwater harvesting. So they collect the rainwater that falls on the roof, and so instead of it gets away in the storm water of a city, they collect it and they use it for their landscaping and so forth. A lot of cultures have a long tradition of that, with very careful irrigation practices, usually small scale. That's something that we want to foreground again, the importance of these local practices that have been very efficient. And again, specifically in the 20th century, these kind of small-scale cultural practices have been transformed into huge irrigation works, or of course water provision in cities, which meant hydroelectric dams or damming for water provision. A country like India has a magnificent tradition of rainwater harvesting and small-scale irrigation on a very local community level. Well, in the 20th century, mid-20th century, we had a major leader in India called Nehru, and for him, dams were the temples of the future. He literally said it, and you know that's not so stupid. Maybe now we think like, oh my goodness, how could he say that? I mean, they're such beautiful temples, and how can you call a dam a temple? But in that time, they believed in progress, that must be done by large-scale infrastructural interventions. Well, they are completely turning the wheel now and trying to get back, at least some politicians, to foreground more of the local conservation practices. So another focal area is to deal with contested water use. Big problem in a lot of countries. Does the water go to the city? Does it go to agriculture? Does it go to the river itself? A whole new phenomenon, the last one. But already the first two one, industry also uses water quite a bit. Lots of water that goes into building a car, like I think, I don't dare to mention a number, but maybe 20,000 liters of water in building a car. Lots of, it's called virtual water. The water that's being used to make a t-shirt, to make a computer and so forth. Lots of water for industry. But the majority, as I said earlier, goes to agriculture, 70%. So a lot of fights about water. Again, we want to focus on that. And then on water heritage. Beautiful water heritage. Okay, next one. So the objectives of the project, long-term objectives is to contribute to the Millennium Development Goals that are development goals that the United Nations put out, and the major one is alleviate poverty. And almost all the development goals that were set out in say early 2000, almost in all of those goals, water has an important function. One of the biggest problems is water sanitation. Like 3 billion people don't have proper sanitation, and one of the Millennium Development Goals is to get that number half by 2015. Just halve it. So I have 1.5 billion people with not good sanitation. We are not getting there. It's I've read already new reports. We are not getting our Millennium Development Goals. But anyways, we try to do that by bringing this cultural diversity in this integrated water resource management, about which I've talked now a couple of times. We do that by fostering these social cultural perspectives in the water sciences, to promote cultural pluralism in water management. That means like listen to many cultural practices, and to contribute to the development of culturally sensitive studies and policies on water. And cultural sensitive, I mean with that you are sensitive to what a culture is already practicing, instead of just moving in and say like, hey, you guys need to do it this way. It doesn't work. People will like say, okay, and then they will not do it. You have to work with the people. You have to get to know, what they want to do, how they are practicing certain things, and how you can facilitate that in a direction that's sustainable. And that means you have to do a lot of translation. You remember I talked about it in the beginning. A lot of connecting, a lot of involvement with the people. Next one. The objectives, so we have different methodological guidelines. This is computer failure. It was supposed to nicely move in there, but it's not flowing as subtly as it should be. But it doesn't matter. The new things are that we are developing methodological guidelines for that, policy recommendations, toolkits, and educational and training material, so that people can actually, that they have a toolbox. I mean, these are all nice words, but how are you going to do it? And so we will have a website for that with particular toolbox. Next one. So the objective short term is again to contribute to these Millennium Development Goals, and by bringing cultural diversity in integrated water resource management, is to promote water scientists and water managers the importance of understanding the link between water and cultural diversity. I talked about that already quite a bit. And to provide information such as case studies and other resources. And so you can envision that the Rio Dassi could be a nice case study. And to facilitate interactions and partnerships of institutions and experts working on the topic. The workshop topic that we had in Governador Valadares was about the Rio Doce Culture Project, which could be a nice case study. And all over the world are case studies being developed. Okay. Okay, it didn't work again. So for that, we are developing a database. So again, the Rio Doce Culture Project could be part of the database. I should not even say could be, should be. Do you know enough English to see? Different, it's very different. It should be part of the database. And a community of practice. It's a concept in multiple stakeholders learning language, community of practice. It means that you create a website in which different groups can contact each other. So you don't all have to reinvent the wheel. If you have a particular program for environmental education, you should not have to develop certain things that are already developed elsewhere. You should just be able to use each other's information. It's much more, you can work with the kids instead of sitting in your office developing a new program. So that's the development of database and community of practice. Next one. So this is what the website will look like. Maybe next one also, Claudio. Yeah. It was supposed to happen in the previous slide also. So this will be the website, and these are all the kind of links and so forth, the kind of traditional model of how you develop a website that different groups can use. Next one. Of the methodologies and policies, so we try to integrate traditional and non-traditional water management practices. You know, the traditional I just spoke about, like say rainwater harvesting, small-scale irrigation, other kind of conservation practices, and to incorporate, and this is very important, local and traditional knowledge in the water sciences. So this is again that element of involvement, engagement, and translation, and to respect knowledge, different kinds of knowledges that are already there, and to respect them, to translate them into hydrological knowledge, and not privileged hydrology as a given, like the scientists will know better. No, often they don't know better. People have, as I said, have lived in areas for thousands of years. Well, they know what they are doing. They know their water body. Of course, it's very different when you are talking about an urbanizing world. You need new kinds of knowledge also, but you need also to work definitely in rural areas with local knowledge. Very, very important. But also actually in urban areas. You can do rainwater harvesting in urban areas. I do it in my backyard. It's really neat, and my students come and look like, oh, okay, yeah. Then they do it themselves. You know, you can do that. There's a lot of local knowledge to do certain things. To ensure full participation of local communities, and there we have again the involvement of other stakeholders in water management to integrate social and cultural factors in making and implementing water policies. Okay. So a little bit, I'm going to go fast over this because you don't have to know all this. You can read about this on the internet also, but UNESCO has different pillars of that focus on water. The IHP that I mentioned earlier, this International Hydrological Program, they have the field offices in many countries, in Brazil also, and there is there's an international office in Paris. Then you have a water university. It's called IHE, International Hydrological Education, which is an institute actually in the Netherlands. Claudio Guerra went to that institute. Actually, I met him there when the institute had its 50th anniversary, which was an amazing, beautiful party. Why? Because there were so many people, like Claudio, people that had been to this university, and they all went back to their own country, and we are talking about African countries, Asian countries, South American countries, everywhere. They all went back, and most of them have just do beautiful water work, like Claudio does. People are water minister or water educators or director of the wastewater treatment plant. They came all through this kind of education. Well, what we try to do in with the Water and Cultural Diversity Project is to implement courses in the engineering training so that the engineers and the hydrologists get into their education knowledge about the cultural sensitivity. Very important to expand the education in that direction. So that's what I do. And actually I gave a course there this last fall about water and history. For the first time we had a course there about the historical uses and management project of water. Very, very exciting. And the engineers loved it. You know, you have we have a prejudice of engineers that they are kind of dull mathematic people and just kind of, straightforward and don't look left and right. No, they love to learn more about culture. It was really exciting to see that they were actually excited about it. Third component, third pillar of the UNESCO Water Family is the World Water Assessment Program. Really good program, a lot of data. You can Google this on internet and get water data over the whole world. Very, very important. Next one. So there are networks of water centers, 17 worldwide, and all kinds of UNESCO chairs. Next one. IHP, the International Hydrological Program, was created in 1975 after an international hydrological decade. So that was from 1965 to 1975. It's an intergovernmental council, so it's all, United Nations means literally nations, all nation-state based. So in that sense, it's actually kind of old program in a globalizing world, but it's still nation-state, intergovernment council responsible for planning the water program, defining its priorities, and it gets, every 6 years it updates its program, its what its goals are and so forth. Next one. So these are the different goals that were set, and right now we are in this phase, IHP 7, so it's the 7th strategical planning phase. And look, it's about water dependencies, systems under stress, because almost all water systems are under stress. In one of my first slides I showed what the stresses are, like urbanization, climate change and so forth. Systems under stress and the societal response, like how do we respond as a society. So that's where the culture comes in, water and culture. Okay, next one. Next one. Here are 3 pillars, many different initiatives within UNESCO. Next one. The background of the launching of this particular water and cultural diversity project had to do with it started at the World Water Forum. The World Water Forum is the largest water forum in the world. Brings a lot of people together from all kinds of areas of the water world. A lot of companies, but also a lot of politicians, NGOs, all kinds of people, and UNESCO also. Yeah, next one. So we had a session there, water and indigenous people. Then on the next World Water Forum, it's every 3 years. Next one. Next one. Next one. We had a World Water Day, water and culture, and after that World Water Day, we started with the actual project, the Water and Cultural Diversity Project. So it was a while in the making, as it usually does. If you work with UNESCO, it takes years to get something done. I was there for half a year. I think a week before I left, they finally had signed off on my office papers, and I was legitimized to have an office there. The next week I was leaving. I mean, they found a way to have me in the office anyways, but that's, anyway, come. Next one. The pilot project of the River Cultures Ecological Futures Project, the first one that I talked about is the Mekong River. Next one. This is one of the projects of the other the Water and Cultural Diversity Project. This is in Yunnan, in China. A really beautiful project of one of our board members. Next one. So these are just examples of particular project that will be part of the database. This is a nice slide of the cultural diversity in that particular project that you just saw announced of the strengthening of biocultural knowledge. So this is all in the Yunnan, in the Great River watershed. In Yunnan province in China, you have a couple of major rivers like the Mekong and Irrawaddy, and they have just a phenomenal cultural diversity. Like all these pictures you see are of different mountain tribes, because it's a very mountainous area, so you get very specific cultures. Some of these areas are threatened to be dammed, so that means like the end of particular cultures right there. So what they try to do in this project is to actually show this ethnic diversity and how they can relate it to biodiversity and how you can help preserving biodiversity by actually using or working with the ethnic diversity. Next one. So just to sum up, diversity of culture is like the complexity of water issues themselves. They are embedded in different levels: global, regional, country, small-scale watershed. Water issues are always associated with resource dynamics of a watershed, so with the different land uses. That's also where the cultural use comes in. They are affected by cultural beliefs and practices. Important point: when culture is not taken into consideration in a sustainable resource management and policy making, there is a lack of trust and compliance. To engage people is one thing. It's very, very important that people also need to trust you. It takes a long time before that trust is built, to work together on preservation, conservation. The efforts and initiatives for solving water availability crisis should link local interest with environmental protection, link upstream with downstream, country development priorities with regional concerns, link the micro situation to the macro picture of watershed management and in government. So again, the connecting quality of water. The water flows through all these connecting points. Obrigado. Thank you for your attention. And this is the Fevereiro Culture Project. Any questions? I could talk about this for hours because I love the topic. But okay. What kind of projects we have in the United States? This water and cultural diversity program is totally new. So we have no project that is defined as a water and cultural diversity project. But there are a lot of projects that could qualify for it and that could participate in the program, especially in that community of practice, you remember? And so projects of that nature are like that River Sphere project at Mississippi. But that's already a relatively large-scale project, and it involves a lot of money to build a place like this. But there are lots of other projects like for example, in Texas, where I'm from, there are a lot of river restoration projects. Local communities that bring the school kids to the banks of the river, that start to restore, plant trees and so forth, and they involve the local communities. They would all qualify for this kind of. And there's a beautiful project, an NGO that's called SOS, that means Save Our Streams, and that NGO actually gives to poor populations little water quality testing kits, and so they hand them out to the schools. And there's one project in Moldova, which is in Europe, Eastern Europe, the poorest country of Europe, Moldova. And they have a major river that's a tributary to the Danube. Very polluted. A lot of East European countries have a lot of pollution. They have, in the government, 2 water quality guys. the whole, serve the whole country. Well, SOS, Save Our Stream, and they are providing these testing kits to local schools, making the kids scientists. So it's a win-win-win situation, because you learn the children that science is actually not such a scary, difficult thing, but you can just do it. You can do pH measurements and so forth. And they have a website, and all the results are put on the website. And so the children are actually helping with the management of their country for water quality testing. Beautiful program. Programs like that, you know, from low level to the river sphere is already a little bit fancy. Oh, my university is involved in a lot of those projects. Yeah, we have a lot of these. Yeah, we have the major river in our area is called the Trinity River, which is the major river that goes through Dallas and Fort Worth. Big urban area, 6 million people. Then it goes down south through Houston, another big urban area, and there it goes into the bay. Lots of problems with the Trinity River, but the governor of Texas has the Trinity River as its main river on his agenda. It's a lot of money to actually restore certain areas and so forth, to get nice urban development that's sustainable for the river. But so my university, we work actually quite a bit with all kinds of tributaries to the Trinity River, certain creeks where our students do water quality testing. We have also a major field station at a lake, which is an important provision for the drinking water. Oh, there are countless projects you can come up with that, as long as they engage the local people or university students or school children, start young. The beauty of involving the school children is that they often bring their parents. It's very hard to educate parents because, you know, they're old like us, not like you guys, but like us here, and they don't want to be told anymore what they actually should do. But when their kids come home and they say, "Mom, why are you washing your car while whole Texas is in a drought, and why are you washing every day your car or watering that lawn?" They will start to think about it, you know, and then they bring the kids to school and they see all the projects that we are doing. It's about excitement, to involve people. You should not say like, "Don't do this." I should even not say should. I don't know how to say it differently though. So you should not say should, but you should invite them. You should get excited. They should want to do it because they can do it. And that's the involvement that you want to create. And children are just a beautiful medium. You can just use children, you know, for their own education, but also to actually educate the whole area around it. Children are like a river, and they come in my building. We have like you guys have a beautiful new building. We have a beautiful new building. It's Environmental Education and Science Building, and the building itself is set up like to develop interdisciplinarity. So there's environmental education, environmental science, geography, chemistry, but also environmental philosophy, my own department. So our students, my students, the environmental philosophy students, have to take a science course. The scientists have to take actually 2 philosophy courses. So all the classes I teach are always interdisciplinary. So I have half of the students are environmental scientists, environmental philosophers, environmental education, environmental journalism, and I make them write papers together so that they learn each other's language. Really important. Like if an environmental scientist has to write a paper with a philosopher, they're kind of looking at each other. It's very interesting. Like I teach graduate seminars. The first day when the students come in the class, like the philosophers sit all there and the scientists sit all there, and you're kind of looking at each other. And it's not totally true because they also all know each other from the building and so forth, but it's a little bit like that. Anyway, a lot of projects are, you can imagine, it's, water is so beautiful. It invites to so many beautiful, exciting projects. Is there another question? Yeah.
Do you have a chair, a business chair from the university?
No, not on mine. Not on mine. No. No, that's a really nice point. There's no UNESCO chair of water and diversity yet. But that might be maybe Claudio Guerrero. So it's hard to, because UNESCO works very slow, and it needs many levels of bureaucracy to implement them. You know, you need to put in requests and reasons why and so forth. And yeah. Other question?
I would like to.
Yeah, sure.
Because we have a UNESCO chair at the University of Auditório.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
About women and water.
Yeah. On women and water. Wonderful. Well, you are further than my university. Congratulations. Okay, well, again, you can go to websites. If you just Google UNESCO Water and Cultural Diversity, and you always can go to Professor Francisco for more information. I brought some brochures and so forth, but you can also find them on the website. Thank you very much. I really enjoy. Oh, you have a question?
Talked a lot about the translation to environmental aspects,
Right.
and the transcultural aspects. What about transindustrial? Like, are you working with any energy development?
Very good question. A very, very good question. Actually, the nice thing of say, your own biosphere area here is that it's partially supported by CEMIC. So there are companies that are actually who set out to be green and to help with environmental protection. But it's a very good point you raise. How do we connect to the business world? Because that's where a lot of work can be done. And lots of businesses are trying to be green, or at least sell themselves as green. Lots of advertisement in, and again, advertisement gives a nice indicator. Advertising is kind of indicator species of how people want to present themselves. Well, if you look at the advertisement of Shell, and they all present themselves as green companies, so it's up to us to actually check, are they really green, and so forth. So those transitions, I like your term, trans-industry is very great term. I should put it in the slide, because it's a very important realm. The group that I work with, we do not enough of that. And actually, I'm on that advisory board to actually represent the first world. So that's why I put in that slide of the LA River, because that's the state of a lot of first world rivers. But I should also represent that kind of connection. Very good. Any other comments or questions? Yeah. Yes, Claudio told me.
He had a very special position. She says that water is a right.
Yes.
Everybody should have water freely, without paying anything. And among
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think? Is UNESCO interested in you or interested?
Yeah, first of all, I don't speak for UNESCO, but for myself. It's very important. It's a big discussion. I think water should be a right. Yes, people should have a right to water. What does that mean, however? And there are a couple of constitutions. South Africa has now in its constitution that water is a right. My own country, the Netherlands, is getting there. So it's slowly percolating into legislation. Water is a right, and I'm 100% behind that. should be a right. I mean, people need water, they need it to survive. You can be without water for just 3 days, I think. Without food, you can be a long time without food, not without water. You need it for sanitation. I mean, millions of people die every year because of bad sanitation. So water should be a basic right, it should be everywhere. And it should be also fairly priced. I don't know if I'm completely in favor of water for free. I know in the United States, water is so cheap and it gets wasted so much. I'm all for a kind of tracked payment, so you get the first, like the basic necessity for free. But after that, you should pay. And after a certain level, you should pay a lot. Like, why do you need so much water? In Dallas, we are famous for the highest water use almost in the country. 264 gallons per day per person, which is outrageous. And we could do so much a better job, like another place in Texas, San Antonio or El Paso, they had a real water crisis. They are more in West Texas. We are a little bit in East Texas, so we have a little bit more water, but not much. We're pretty much in a drought for the last 10 years. You cannot water the lawn with that shortage of water? Are you crazy? 70% of our water in the summer goes to lawn, to watering the lawn. My goodness, it's purely for aesthetics, or aesthetics is even way too beautiful a word. It's to show your neighbor that you can water the lawn or whatever. It should be forbidden. But you cannot forbid it, although there is legislation, actually. You're not allowed to water the lawn during certain hours of the day, not on certain days even. So there is legislation, but there's not a legislation that you are not allowed to have a lawn. That would go too far. But you're only allowed to water it at night, between certain hours and certain days. And so same with washing your car, at least when there is a certain drought stage declared by the mayor. To get back to the water pricing, so it's very hard to forbid certain things, but when your bill comes in with like $500 for water, you're not going to water your lawn anyway. You're going to put in nice native vegetation, beautiful, that doesn't need all that water. Nice cactus. I have beautiful cactus in my backyard. It's gorgeous. You don't need this damn grass, this Bermuda grass or Augustan grass. It's horrible. Needs so much water. And it's not really beautiful. So, in that case, I'm very much in favor of a certain pricing of water to reduce the abuse of water. But talking about, poor neighborhoods, should be free. When people, but even there, it should be, when people are hooked up to a system, which is of course already, in a lot of situations not a case, maybe even there you should have, the basic use of water for free. But always make sure that people don't abuse, that they don't, as soon as people have water, and when it's so cheap, they just take showers of 10 minutes, or they forget to turn the faucet off, it's, when things are just there, we are inclined to forget about it, to forget how it got there, how did the water get there. I always tell my students in the first water class, like, do you know where the water out from your faucet, where it comes from? Majority didn't know. They have no idea where it comes. It comes out of the faucet, that's it, Where does it come from? And even if you say, well, it comes from Lake Louisville, that's where our water comes from, and it's like, well, how did it come in Lake Louisville, Well, that means thinking like a watershed, thinking like a water basin. This famous American conservation thinker, Aldo Leopold, he has a famous expression, thinking like a mountain. We have to start to think how a mountain thinks, like what does a mountain need? Well, we need to think like a watershed. Like what does Lake Louisville need? What does Darcy River need in order to be a river that's alive and that's that you can celebrate, that you can drink, that you can swim, in which you can swim with. Ooh, it takes a lot of awareness raising of whole communities, of industry, of agricultural sector, to start to think like that. So yeah, I'm not in favor of complete free water, but definitely for the basic necessities, and then a little bit more. You should be allowed to have a little bit extra. Any other comment? Well, I hope I didn't talk too fast. Even if you just got 10% of it, I hope it were a good 10%, and that the rest will percolate later. And I really appreciate to have had the opportunity to talk, not enough with you, but to you, and to present this UNESCO program. And I truly hope that there will be a beautiful program from the Dusty River, and you do already beautiful projects with Professor Francisco and the Dusty Lakes and so forth, and it's very, very important work. So I hope, especially the students, that you will get more and more excited about this and want to participate in these kind of projects. Thank you so much. Obrigado.
One more question.
Okay, good.
Por favor. Some studies concerning the impacts of the Paraná hydroway, or other studies concerning the Mercosur area. Probably, I don't know if you know south. Southern part of South America.
Yeah. I don't. I've heard about it. I've read about it. I don't know by heart, and I'm not. I know very little about your country. I'm very ashamed about that. I should not be the one who's giving this talk here. but I know actually one of my students from Venezuela did a project on it, which was very, very good. And I can give you her contact if you want more. But there's a lot of research about that. And on the board of the Water and Cultural Diversity, there are people from South America also. I can ask them to get in touch with you if you give your email address, because they will be much more qualified to deal with your questions. But very good. I really liked it. I like it very much that we close the session and you speak up and say, like, I want to put my question in Portuguese. And I like also very much that you are interested in a project that's of major importance. Like, these are the major, big dam projects, and you guys need to think about it. I live all the way there, and I'm busy with the new water reservoir that they're going to plan for Dallas, which is crazy. It will just completely destroy beautiful hardwood bottomland forest, and it is so much, so much brain space. But it's very important that you yourself get concerned about these issues in your country or in the countries close to you. Thank you.
Você entendeu? Entendeu? Legal.
Yeah. Are there other questions in Portuguese?
Alguma outra pergunta aí em português? Alguém quer animar? Se alguém tiver. Oi, agora, Paulo.
É o seguinte, nós realizamos aqui ano passado o primeiro seminário internacional pela renaturalização de rios. Tiveram aqui representantes do Sena, do Tamisa, do Lisa Oizar, lá da Alemanha, da Baviera, do Anacostia, ou Anacostia, lá em Washington, que é um afluente do Potomac. E depois desse encontro, que teve a participação da UFMG e do Estado de Minas, foi proposto o segundo encontro internacional e o representante, o presidente do comitê desse rio lá de Washington, propôs que fosse lá. No princípio seria em outubro agora. A ideia é pegar todos os movimentos pela renaturalização, revitalização dos rios e fazer encontros internacionais onde a revitalização dos rios estivesse vinculada a uma luta pela mudança cultural, mudança de mentalidade, mas no aspecto político, não partidário. Seria tentar mudar o mundo, já que a economia mundial é que é responsável pela destruição dos rios e das florestas. Então eu gostaria de saber a possibilidade desse movimento aí da Unesco, parece que ela faz parte, né, pelo que eu vi, se eles poderiam também ajudar a participar desse encontro, convidando as pessoas que lutam lá no Rio Nilo, no Rio Amarelo, Mississippi, outros, para poder aglutinar esses movimentos em torno dos rios, mas numa proposta não só de revitalizar, mas de uma mudança política internacional.
Okay. Paul is a colleague from the university, and he has been dealing with river projects for a long, long time. He was, until recently, a coordinator of a project called the Manuel Zone. And last year they had here a meeting, an international meeting on river restoration and revitalization. And they are now programming, probably for October this year, another meeting that probably will happen in Washington.
Yeah, but they brought people from the towns, they brought the San River from the de onde que veio o towns do Sena de Potomac,
do Anacostia e do Isar, lá da Baviera, da Alemanha. E aqui teve o Rio das Velhas, o Rio São Francisco e o Rio Mosquito, lá do norte de Minas. Esse encontro foi em setembro de 2008. E ficamos de fazer o segundo encontro, porque foi um sucesso muito grande, em torno de 500, 600 pessoas todo dia, e gerou assim um movimento. Então, eu gostaria de, toda a articulação disso, né, estabelecer esse vínculo para que a gente possa somar nesse encontro.
What he'd like to know is if there is any possibility for further contacts in order to help this movement to happen in October, if you would indicate a possibility for that.
I would love to hear more about it. It's very good and very wonderful to hear that these kind of projects are happening. River restoration is a very, very important theme worldwide, and I need to know a little bit more what the program is, what you guys are doing, and so forth. Virtually every self-respecting city in Europe and the United States is restoring its river. Literally, that means like in a lot of cities the river has been kind of put in the back of the city because it was just used for transportation and industry. Now they start to make urban waterfront development around the river. A lot of rivers have been gone underground, became roads. They start to unpave the river. It's amazing. I can mention a lot of cities that have been doing this. Why? Because it actually means often a lot of money for a city because they develop that area and you get nice restaurants and people parade along the river. It attracts people. People love water. So there's a lot of urban restoration. Also, actually, in an ecological sense, because this is more urban sense, but also in ecological sense that they create floodplains where we create floodplains where they actually plant certain things and bring their children and so forth. Also outside the cities, in the rural areas, you see a lot of focus on river restoration, which is very, very important. At the same time, there's still a lot of impact on the rivers. So that's why this is such an exciting development to counteract still threatening impact on rivers. So if the conference was about river restoration, it's very, very fascinating. I know a couple of books about it, and I would love to talk more with you about it. I'm sure that we can find some kind of connection to see how we can collaborate. There will be certain programs that we will try to start, and at the same time, having said that, don't expect too much from UNESCO to do these things for you. What UNESCO tries to do is actually to show that these are important things to develop, like as I showed in my slide, like to give you a toolkit, how you can do that in your own place. To develop this website of a community of practice, so you can actually ask other places, like, how are you guys doing this? Similarly, as you probably did at the conference, you get all these different rivers, people from these different river basins together in order to learn from each other. So what you do is create a platform of possibility of exchange. So I think the most important thing that UNESCO could offer you is enlarging of your platform of connecting. And that's already very, very important. And I would love to see connections to Asian rivers. They are under big threat. African rivers are a big threat. But we should talk a little bit more afterwards. Yeah. Thank you.
Então, resumindo, o que ela está dizendo é que ela gostaria de conversar mais com você para saber pouco mais.
Pegar uns contatos, seu, tal, né?
E com certeza ela acha que é possível, sim, através desse programa, ajudar de alguma forma a ampliar as possibilidades para esse encontro. Mas ela lembra que normalmente, acho que nós todos sabemos disso, a Unesco quase nunca ou raramente a Unesco tem recursos financeiros, mas a Unesco tem uma chancela extremamente importante que ajuda a facilitar reuniões dessa natureza. Então isso seria uma possibilidade e ela está disposta, claro, a conversar com você para saber mais a respeito. E ampliar, exato.
Dinheiro não é problema.
That's very good. Yes, that's a wonderful conclusion of this. Money is not a problem. I wish I could say that. It's the solution. It's not. The solution is engagement. It's you. It's a solution. Yeah, people and nature is the relationship and the joy of the relationship. That's the solution. Money is not a solution of anything. It ruins a lot of things, but it helps out.
Uma outra colocação? Vamos lá, pessoal. Não?
Ok.
Sim, por favor.
A senhora conhece o programa de Nova York, que saiu até na televisão passada, sobre a captação de água nas montanhas,
Fazendo.
Que chama de isolamento,
You want to show, if you know the New York program, that where they are now giving some money to farmers that actually feed New York with water. I don't know the name of the program. Only one. New York with water.
Oh, right. That's in the Adirondacks. Yes, that's a beautiful. That's one of the most successful programs for a city politics that really has thought about their water management. So what New York City has done, they support farmers in their watershed. You remember I told you, like, you should start to think as a watershed, as a water basin. How do you call it? Hydrografia, Bacia hydrographica. And New York does that. And it's the most beautiful example of good city politics, because they invested money to actually support farmers to not abuse their land, because if they use a lot of fertilizers or pesticides, it all comes in the water basin. And that's the water that goes to New York City. Well, the soil can purify a little bit, but not enough. So the water, if they would not do this program, the water would come and they would need immense treatment plants before the water comes into the city to treat that water. Very, very expensive. They got actually the big discussion about a new treatment plant in Brooklyn about it. But instead of choosing for that, they choose for supporting farmers to have sound land management. It's always the second thing I tell my students, after I ask them what is you want to compare. The second one is like, good water management starts with good land management. Water and land are, again, it's this relationship, this connection. Water is not just water, it comes out of and through the soil. So what people do on the soil, what they do with the soil, has a major consequences for the water supply. Not only agriculture with pesticide and fertilizer, but also clear cutting your mountain. The fish, of course. So one of the things that they support is that people actually keep a lot of forests, so that the soil stays in very good shape, so that the water percolates and so forth. Extremely successful program. And we are talking about a major area, a huge area. The Adirondacks are a big area. So New York has been very visionary, because they implemented this program already years ago, but it's a nice example. Some cities have followed that, like Austin in Texas, which is the capital of Texas. They actually work with a lot of lands around Texas to have good water management programs and so forth. But more cities should think like that, think like a watershed. Thank you for that question. It's I don't know about Belo Horizonte, how they do it. Maybe you know how Belo Horizonte is getting its water, and if they actually, I don't know how you guys get your water.
Our main water source is actually pretty bad. We have three others. We are not that short of water because we have a lot of underground.
Right.
Aquifers. Belo is very far from that.
Yeah.
There are some nice projects trying to move the thinking on that way. Yeah. And the Manuel's own project, I think, is a visionary project in terms of the San Francisco base.
Yeah.
Our project in the Rio Doce is going in that direction too. There are projects, but still,
right.
As far as I know, there is not even one single town or city in Brazil that has
these kind of ideas.
Unfortunately, not yet.
Yeah.
Sim, não, mas ela estava só me perguntando se a gente tem, se Belo Horizonte tem um projeto nessa natureza. Então eu estou dizendo que, infelizmente, de proteger dar recursos para que a área dos mananciais, né, que estão nas cabeceiras dos nossos mananciais, ainda estamos longe de fazer isso. Mas eu acho que é uma ideia fantástica. E acho que tudo bem, você entendeu? O projeto é um sucesso, parece. E a capital do Texas também já está fazendo esse projeto. Costa. Ok. Então, se não tem mais perguntas, eu queria muito agradecer a presença de todos. Eu acho que como eu falei no início, essa é o primeiro contato com a doutora Irene e a experiência dela com relação à diversidade cultural relacionada à água. Eu espero muito que essa ideia, né, ela cresça aqui na nossa universidade, no Instituto da Água da UFMG, e que a gente possa ter a participação, né, de diferentes visões e interesses em prol da gente considerar na conservação dos recursos hídricos a diversidade cultural, assim como o social, o econômico e certamente o ecológico. Eu queria apenas aproveitar a chance de dizer que iniciativas como essa, que eu agradeci o IEART por permitir a vinda da doutora Irene, como eu agradeci o Cláudio, enfim, como eu agradeci a possibilidade dessa natureza, eu espero que a gente possa ter isso com mais frequência, ou seja, problemas concretos, né? Ela perguntou sobre Belo Horizonte, imediatamente veio na minha cabeça o quanto que nós sabemos como é o abastecimento de água em Belo Horizonte, quanto que a gente está ciente das dificuldades dessa cidade para o futuro, né? Acho que a gente imagina que temos muita água, porque temos alguns mananciais, mas quantos de nós já tem conhecimento do crescimento dessa cidade, da utilização, do desperdício de água nessa cidade? Então, acho que são coisas que nós, na universidade, precisamos traduzir isso de uma forma concreta. E as pessoas nas diferentes áreas, não precisa ser biólogo, não precisa ser engenheiro, não precisa ser, enfim, um profissional específico da área, nós todos dependemos e precisamos da água. Então, nós todos temos que cuidar dela. A ideia da diversidade cultural é isso aí. Então, eu queria muito agradecer a presença de cada um e espero que a gente possa ter outras oportunidades como essas. I'd like very much to thank you on behalf of the IEART and also my institute and the newborn Water Institute from this university, and we do hope that we can get on nicely with this project. We hope to have you here in the near future. Thank you very much.
I hope so too. I hope to see you all again.
I hope to.